My name is Rabbi David Steinhardt. I came to Boca Raton in 1994.
And this is Bill Gralnick interviewing the rabbi, who is senior rabbi of the Benet Torah congregation. This interview is on behalf of the Boca Raton Historical Society and the Greater Jewish Federation of Boca Raton. It is Wednesday, October 15th, 2016. Good afternoon, Rabbi. Let's start with a few historical questions. When did you start thinking about becoming a rabbi, and when did you make the final decision?
It's a good question. I believe that my thinking about becoming a rabbi started as a child. I was very touched by the scene at the synagogue where I grew up. I come from a family where the maternal side of my family were refugees from Nazi Germany. I was involved in a synagogue that provided a great deal for the youth and for both in terms of formal education and youth programming. I had an inspirational rabbi myself, and I visited Israel as a teenager. I think those were the primary factors which led me to thinking about becoming a rabbi. In high school, I went to see my rabbi. I told him that I was toying with the idea of becoming a rabbi. He told me at that time that I was too old to play with toys. He suggested that I don't go to a seminary or to Yeshiva University or the joint program of the Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia University, but rather get as broad a secular education as possible. I went to the University of Connecticut, where I majored in psychology and thought about becoming a psychologist, actually. But I saw that as being a little bit limiting in terms of what my interests were. I was very interested in education. I loved working directly with people. I loved teaching and saw myself in the role of a counselor. And I thought that being a rabbi would enable me to integrate all of those things. Connected to that also was the idea that I believe that I had a very ancient tradition that spoke to the contemporary challenges. And so all of those things came together. After I finished college then, I spent a year teaching in the inner city school in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and then I applied to rabbinical school.
And why did you choose the conservative movement?
I believe that the conservative movement both upheld a traditional brand of Judaism, but also was open to the possibilities for change. I saw it as a uniquely American movement, and I saw in the conservative movement both like-minded people. I also knew in the immediate future, as I was applying, that the Jewish Theological Seminary had the greatest scholars in the American Jewish scene, and so I wanted to learn from them.
It was a little bit of a winding road before Boca Raton. What were the stops that you made on the way?
It wasn't all that winding, actually. I had two previous pulpits. The first pulpit that I had was in northeastern Ohio, in Warren, Ohio. There was a congregation of about 125 families. I had a delightful experience there. I was very much embraced by the community, and I learned a lot in that context, in a small community, a small congregation. I stayed there for 8 years. I knew it was time to leave after 8 years. I was ready for something bigger, maybe more challenging. And I had been involved in the neighboring community's Jewish Federation, in their Jewish Community Relations Council, in their Israel Overseas work, as well as in the education in that community. I was involved with a group of people who had started a day school there. The conservative synagogue in Youngstown got wind that I was thinking of leaving Warren, so I moved 20 miles down the road to a congregation of about 500 families. After 4 years there, I had essentially had enough of northeastern Ohio, thinking that I wanted to raise my children in a larger Jewish milieu, Jewish context, and so I thought about moving to Boston, New York, or South Florida. The pulpit at Benet Torah congregation here in Boca Raton was open, and I came down and visited, and the deal was sealed. Yeah.
So you walk in the door on 18th Street, and you realize, like Toto, you're not in Ohio in this case anymore.
Correct.
Tell us about the Benet Torah that you found.
The Benet Torah I found was very exciting. There was an understanding amongst its leaders that the future was very bright, the demographics in Boca Raton were changing in that the Jewish community was exploding, it was expanding, and so there were all types of possibilities. There were about 700 families at that time. The leadership was focused on building a synagogue, and I was happy to be a part of that. Most of the programming that was done at that time was centralized programming. That is, there was a focus on a particular group of people programming for themselves and those who wanted to be a part of it. There also was a significant Shabbat morning service taking place, primarily driven by a very charismatic and talented cantor named Yehuda Schiffman. And I walked into that situation, which was truly a gift. And
when you say significant Shabbat morning, what do you mean by significant?
Well, at that time, there probably were about 550, 650 people coming every Saturday morning, which was very unusual for a conservative congregation in the United States. Proudly, I can say, and grateful I can say, that we've continued to grow that. And now we have, during the season here in Boca, we have well over 1,000 people every Shabbat morning.
And I interrupted you. You were talking about the role of Cantor Schiffman in that growth and development. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Yehuda was a very charismatic character. He was a warm personality, multi-talented music with multi-talents in his music. And so he attracted a lot of people. He worked extremely well with children. And so Yehuda built a children's choir that was exceptional and exciting. And from those children, a lot of parents got involved in the synagogue. And what was, in most places in this country, an experience for older people, that is a Shabbat morning service, this is in the early 90s, was something that was multi-generational and exciting. And it gave me a great opportunity to be exposed to a big crowd of people and to be able to share my ideas about Torah and the Jewish tradition, the Jewish people, and the Jewish place in the world. And that's continued now for 24 years.
So you've got this excitement going on. You've got a lot of people on the other side of the bima. In many congregations, when that type of opportunity presents itself, there are often tensions, if you will, between the left side of the bima and the right side of the bima. You seem to have, through your rabbinate, a unique way of relating to cantors. Tell us how you navigate that.
Oh, when you said the left and the right side of the bima, you were referring to looking straight
Yes.
at the bima and seeing the cantor on one side
Right.
and the rabbi on the other. There are a couple things that I would like to say about that. The first is, I love music, and I love Jewish music, and I love cantorial music. So that immediately puts me in a different place than most rabbis who see the service as revolving around their words. I think that a great service in the Jewish tradition is both intellectually stimulating and aesthetically pleasing. I think that a lot of the excitement and a lot of the spirit is actually contained within the music. And so I start off with this sense that I want a cantor who can to entertain, move people, touch people's spirits and souls, etc., and I'll be there with them. And Yehuda recognized that. He used to give me parts, and we used to sing duets together, which were really enjoyable.
Ever being a cantor cross your mind?
No.
Okay. In the, I guess as we say for transparency's sake, it should be known I'm a congregant of yours. So I know the amazing amount of educational and social programs that go on at Benet Torah. Tell us what your theory and intent are behind all of this diverse activity and what its purpose is when, after all, some people would say isn't a synagogue for prayer and Jewish learning?
One of the things that I realized when I got to Benet Torah was, and I alluded to it in the beginning of the interview, that all of the programming was centralized. And I knew that the community was more diverse than a community with one voice or one particular set of interests or coming from one socioeconomic part of the community. And I had a sense early on that it would be very important for us to diversify our programming, to do things that were appealing to different age groups. I want to say that in a particular context. I learned from a great scholar of Jewish history by the name of Gerson Cohen a notion years ago. And the notion was that after the destruction of the temple and the exile of the Jewish people 2,000 years ago, the synagogue developed rapidly as the portable state of the Jewish people. It was in the synagogue that not only the Torah was kept alive, but the Hebrew language was kept alive, Jewish culture was kept alive, Jewish expression, Jewish values were kept alive. And so I've always seen the synagogue as having a lot of diverse purposes. And so we create a community at a synagogue that is about both building a community of learning and prayer, but more than that, social action, being part of a larger community and responding to the needs of a larger community, advocacy for Israel and education about Israel, education in the broadest sense. So it's a place where people come together to socialize, to enjoy culture together, to learn together, and to pray together.
Now, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of people who go through the building for purposes other than prayer. And as you've said, you've got a diverse offering for them. Mm-hmm. How is that developed so that it doesn't become chaotic, just a sense of jigsaw puzzles thrown out on a table?
Yeah. I have a good handle on that. The idea of prayer is about both self-reflection and it's about entering into a conversation with God. At its core, I think that there are other ways of having that conversation. And another way is through acts of kindness. Another way is through learning. So we've developed both departments that literally work to care for people in the congregation, the elderly, the sick. Departments that reach out to other populations in the community that are needy, as well as a significant and an extensive program of learning. When I first came to Benet Torah, there were essentially 3 Jewish professionals on staff. There were a few maintenance people, there were a couple teachers in our school. We now have on our payroll over 110 people. It's grown significantly, and that's because of a vision of growing our schools. We did not have an early childhood program then, we do now. We're about to embark on an infant care program. We have an afternoon Hebrew school program, a high school program, informal youth activities, and a rather extensive adult program for Jewish learning. So all of that, and then there's administrative challenges with all that, just finding the space for all the programming that we're doing. Having said that, I also understand that our success is not too unlike the success that one finds in real estate. Location, location, location. We are just located in a prime piece of real estate with a rapidly growing Jewish community surrounding us over these last 25 years.
You've spoken about this diversity and development of programming. If you had to pick a flagship 2 or 3 programs, what do you think is really stamped? This is Benet Torah special.
I could point to a few different things. I'll point to 3. The first is adult education, as I mentioned. And our education is not only an education in the primary building blocks of Jewish knowledge, but it's an education that reflects the values of our tradition. We have, through that, or in pursuit of that, we have partnered with institutions of Jewish learning that are national and international. Specifically, I'm thinking about the Florence Melton Mini School, and thinking about the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. And we've brought some of their curriculum and some of their ideas into our adult education program. I think that all of what we do has to speak to a contemporary public. And so placing a values conversation out front has been very important. And what I've seen is that people are responsive to that. The second area that I'd speak about in the area of culture and music is that for 25 years now, we have had an outstanding concert series that has featured the best cantors in the world and the best in Jewish music and in Israeli music. And that has brought together 6 times a year or more some of not only the best artists and performers in the Jewish music world, but 1,000 interested congregants and members of the community to be entertained by them. The third is a relatively new project that we call TLC. TLC obviously in English is Tender Loving Care, which is a reflection of the program, but it stands for Tzedakah, Limud, and Chesed. That's righteousness and charity, learning and kindness. And through that program then we have assisted all different organizations that serve underserved populations in our community. What's been interesting about that is many young families, young couples, young adults have gotten involved in that program who would not come to worship, who would not necessarily come for Torah learning, but they do come for what is essentially a religious activity, and that is reaching out to other people.
Would it then be appropriate to say Benet Torah is sort of a cradle-to-grave opportunity for the people who want to take advantage of it?
For sure, and it's becoming even more so, as I said, as we're introducing infant care at Benet Torah, and we certainly cover, life cycles and rituals that in people's lives, and we do that rather beautifully.
Now, one more thing about the Melton Program.
Yeah.
I understand that there is a special place in the United States for Benet Torah and the Melton Program. Tell us a little bit about the development and where it is now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I think that part of the development of the program comes from the fact that Florence Melton lived the latter part of her life here in Boca Raton. And Florence was such an incredible person, and for me a true joy and a privilege to get to know and to spend time with. Part of my connection to Melton goes much earlier in that growing up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, I was part of 2 pilot programs that were done in the United States, one in Columbus, Ohio, and one in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to bring Melton Bible studies to Hebrew schools, to Hebrew high schools. I was exposed at that time to this concept of critical biblical scholarship, learning Bible from the perspective of history, anthropology, psychology, etc. And I was really turned on by that as a high school kid. But then, so the Melton name became something that I was familiar with and interested in. Melton developed a school of Jewish education at the Jewish Theological Seminary as well as at Hebrew University. Florence Melton, as an adult, was a woman who had a yearning, a thirst for ongoing learning. And she went to an adult education class at her synagogue in Columbus, Ohio, and found it dreadful. It was a program that was being taught by a local rabbi or cantor. It was a program without a true curriculum, and it didn't seem serious to her. And so she invested with scholars at Hebrew University in creating a program for adult learning for American Jews originally, who were serious learners, who were people that had higher degrees in secular education but felt like they knew nothing Jewishly. And so that program then developed. When I came here 24 years ago, I saw that the program existed and I began to teach in the program. I taught in it for a number of years. I saw the success in terms of the numbers of people that it reached, and then brought a class to the synagogue. I needed to do that for 2 reasons. One, it was much more convenient for me to teach. Second, I could sell it to people in the synagogue. It began to grow at Benet Torah, and then what happened is around 2008, with the budget crises that nonprofits were facing, the Federation decided that they would let go of the Melton Program. I was committed to save it, and I kept it at Benet Torah. I raised money to hire a site director, and it began to grow again. And now we have hundreds of students in the Melton Program. I also want to tell you that I had the wonderful opportunity to learn with Florence herself, to listen to her ideas about life, Jewish life, American Jewish life, American life. And I also taught her a text the night before she died, which is a memorable experience in my own life.
I can't imagine. It really is one of the things, I guess, that brings to fulfillment one's place in the rabbinate.
You know, I want to add something to it. One of the things that one realizes when one is in Boca Raton for a while is that we're surrounded with incredibly resourceful people and people that have done wonderful things in their lives who then come down here to slow down a bit. And a number of years ago, there were 3 women in the congregation whom I knew, and they were my elderly friends, and I was their young boyfriend. And that was Elizabeth Zinman and Florence Melton and a woman named Beatrice Mayer, Buddy Mayer from Chicago. Zinman and Melton have both passed away, both in their 90s. Buddy, thank God, is still alive. But I wanted to do an evening in conversation with these 3 great women who all accomplished so much and were such great philanthropists later in their lives. I didn't get around to it, and I feel very badly. I've always felt badly about that.
There seems to be a pattern here where the teacher has learned from other teachers. You've mentioned some impacting names. Let's go back to the Hartman name, because to interject something personally here, my perception as one of your congregants is that you became in some way a changed person and a changed rabbi when you and the Hartman Institute came together. Tell us about the Hartman Program and what it has done for your rabbinate and how its place has been and put, if you will, into the growth of the synagogue.
Sure. I think that your reflection is real because I feel that is true about my own rabbinate, that it did change my rabbinate. And I'll tell you how it did so. I first met Daniel Hartman, who at the time was the director of the Institute and the son of the great Rabbi David Hartman, who was also one of the great modern Jewish philosophers and thinkers of our time. I had a wonderful opportunity to study with David for about 4 summers, and he was really inspirational and influential on my life. But the first meeting with the Hartman Institute came when Daniel Hartman was here in South Florida interviewing me to be a rabbinic fellow at his institute. And what I saw in Daniel, what he was talking about and what the institute represented came true. That was, they were trying to create what I would call a values narrative for contemporary Judaism. Knowing that Judaism and the Jewish people have gone through such great changes in the last 60, 80 years, both the end of Eastern European Jewish, the centers of Eastern European Jewry, the Holocaust, the birth of the State of Israel, and the emergence of the American Jewish community as a significant force both in America, worldwide, and in shaping Judaism. Their belief matched what I was feeling, and what I was feeling is that we have something to offer, not only the next generation who is growing up, but something to offer the society in which we live in through the teaching of and the expression of the values that are that our tradition is laden with, and that we really should be leading with that. And I felt that the ongoing continuous repetition of the events of the past and the complete emphasis on ritual life as opposed to meaningful valued life was something that was holding Judaism back, and in fact holding myself back in my rabbinate. The fact that an authentic and important Jewish institution and very significant Jewish teachers were talking about that which I believed then freed me to say, this is my conversation and this is where I am taking my synagogue.
Great answer. Thank you. Another word that's been a theme throughout this conversation of ours is values. Mm-hmm. You have stepped out of Benet Torah into the community as part of the expression of value-laden Judaism.
Right.
Tell us, first of all, why? Why, as the rabbi of this huge, growing metropolis, if you will, of a synagogue, do you think it's important to involve yourself elsewhere? And tell us about the elsewheres.
Thanks. I think Judaism began with a vision. and the vision was implanted in Abraham, our forefather. Abraham came from a world that was repressive. It was a world of paganism. It was a world of materialism. And he had a vision of a different type of world. And the world empowered people. And the world was a world that dignified human life. And so he wasn't stuck in the world as it was, but he worked for the world that he wanted it to be. I remember, and you probably remember also, when we were teenagers, that Bobby Kennedy, and I don't know if Bobby Kennedy was the first one to say this, but he was known for this line: some people see the world as it is and they ask why. And other people see the world as it should be and they say, why not? So I think that the times that we're living in compel religious leaders, or certain religious leaders certainly have compelled me to say that the world can be different than the forces that are so ugly and so dangerous and so filled with hatred. And there can be a world where religions and religious leaders respect pluralism, respect the divinity that's found in every person. And so I've chosen to step out of my traditional role just in my own community and to go to other communities to have those types of conversation. And I have found wonderful and willing partners here in Boca Raton, both in the Christian community and also in the Muslim community. And I think it's needed more now than ever, and it's a dialogue and a trialogue that I'm absolutely committed to continuing during these days. I have been in it my whole life, actually, and I'll tell you that part of it too. The maternal side of my family comes from Nazi Germany. And in spite of their experiences in Germany, I had a grandmother and a mother that were always open to people. And they came here, and they did not come here with resentment about their past. They came here with a great deal of sadness about what they lost, but a recollection of the good things in their past and the people along the way who they had positive, loving, responsible relationships with. And they were always open to people. I grew up in the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut. In my early years, they began this project known as busing. And most of the Jewish families in my community left Bridgeport and went to the suburbs. My family stayed in Bridgeport, and so I had an education where I was surrounded by Portuguese and Puerto Rican people and African Americans and a whole diverse group of people. And I learned from them, and I was a part of that community and that culture. And I was a student leader, and I got a lot of fulfillment from it. When I went to college, I was involved in a tutors corps where I went to Hartford, Connecticut, and taught kids in the inner city. And when I first became a rabbi, I was involved in interethnic and interracial understanding. That eventually led to my work with the Palestinian community in Youngstown, Ohio. I find that the holiest moments that I experience is moments when people of different faiths, people of difference, are able to come together respecting the humanity, or more than the humanity, the divine spark that exists in every human being. I'm not going to give that up. I love that experience, and I want it to be shared with people. I think it's really important. So it has become a very important part of my rabbinate. I recently read that a great writer and thinker from Jerusalem by the name of Yossi Klein Halevi, he said that he views every religion as being a different denomination of one faith. The faith is the faith in God, and all of us take different roads there, and we have to be able to listen to each other on our travels and in our different roads.
Just for the historical record, give us some examples, concrete examples of some of the activities you're involved with here in Boca Raton.
Over the years, I have been involved in conversations that have to do with the three Abrahamic faiths at St. Gregory's Church. I'm involved in a program called the Trialogue at the university, at Florida Atlantic University, that Professor Alan Berger runs, and it's co-chaired by Father Andrew Sherman and myself. I've been involved in a program called JAM, Jews and Muslims Together, and that was a learning program with Muslim couples and Jewish couples, and we studied each other's texts, we learned about each other's traditions. That's been another program. And I'm a founder of the Boca Raton Area Clergy Association. It's called Boca Raton Interfaith Clergy Association. I founded that with Father Andrew Sherman. We gather together once a month with clergy from different religious institutions, churches, synagogues, and the Boca Raton Islamic Center. And we both talk about what are needs in our community, what are the important people in our community, address us, and we have an open dialogue that's been going on for about 10 years also.
And you've taken these values also back to the Jewish community as being the chairman of the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Federation, and taken the opportunity to share your deep beliefs on this kind of work with our own community. This pretty much wraps up what it was we wanted to accomplish. I want to, first of all, compliment you on a fascinating interview. And I'm laughing because I'm reminding myself of the debates. I would like to give you the opportunity to make a closing statement. But if you would, ruminate for a couple of minutes on why Jewish people should be Jewish.
We've been given an incredible gift, this gift of Torah. It's a gift that not only is a description of our past as a history, it talks about the beginning of a relationship with God, and it creates aspirations for the type of people that we want to be. I think that I know that we've always been a small people. In terms of size, we always probably will be, because Judaism does make demands of us. Their responsibilities in living a Jewish life. And yet I think that we have served our mission as being a light unto the nations by virtue of the values-driven lives that we have shared in as communities, and I hope that will continue. There's a message that we have to give to the world, and it is a message of learning, and it's a message of faith, and it's a message of acting in the kindest, most responsible ways possible for each other, for ourselves, and for the world.
Rabbi David Steinhardt, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. It was a pleasure.